welcome to our main Bible topic this afternoon, and happy Sabbath to everyone. Just want to make a short introduction. My name is Salvador Gomez, and if you are joining for the first time, we are studying Revelation chapter 14, verses 6 and 7, which is the first angel's message. And we're going to go over what we have covered so far on the chart, um, referring to the time periods that are on the chart. We've studied the very commencement of the chain of truth, which was the 7 times of Leviticus chapter 26, which is also called the scattering time, when the people of God, the Jews, were scattered abroad. They were scattered abroad because they broke the covenant that God had made with them during the time of Moses. The covenant was made, if you remember, at Mount Sinai. And so they broke that covenant, and as a result, Leviticus 26, the curse, um, uh, came into effect. Okay, came into effect, and as a result, they were carried captives to Babylon, and that's what we see in the figures on the chart as well. We can see um, Daniel chapter 2, the great image. We see the four empires there: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and pagan Rome. These were the four empires that God used to scatter God's people. Okay, um, and even though it began with the Jews or the Jewish nation, it didn't end there, because once Jesus Christ came, we saw that in the 2,300 days, um, we saw that the Jews would no longer be a people, no longer be a nation, or be the chosen. That from that there would be a time period, which would be 34 AD, um, where Christ would begin to adopt or graft in those that were of the Gentile persuasion, those that were not Jewish. Excuse me, those that were not Jewish, right? It would no longer be the Jew outwardly, but that which is inwardly, spiritually speaking, right? This is what Christ did when he died for each and every one of us, right? He didn't die for the Jews only, but for the whole world. That would also cover the Gentiles. Um, and so they would also, because the 7 times would cover amount of time all the way to 1844, 1843, according to William Miller, that there would be some that were converted to Christianity or to Christ, that they too must go through the 7 times uh, curse, because they also were grafted in to that inheritance, you can say. Um, and so these are the things that we have been studying. We have been looking at this, mainly the 7 times of Leviticus chapter 26, beginning at 677 BC. As we look at the chart, 538 BC is when Babylon fell, the nation of Babylon or the kingdom. Um, then the Medes and the Persians would come in at that time, and then the next date we see is 457 is when the 2,300 days begin. This is 220 years after 677, uh, the commencement of the 2520, which is one in the same with the 2300 days is one in the same with the 2520. It's the same time prophecy, just given at a later time. It would have a different commencement, but it's talking about the same thing. Okay, there is some additional information, right? And that would be that the judgment would begin at the end, right? At the end of the 2300 days, that there would be a judgment that we have to get into after the first and second angel. We are still covering the first.
Is that judgment investigative?
The investigative judgment. That is correct. Okay, now 332 AD. Let's take a look at that here. Look at it over here on the website. Okay. On the description of this video, I have placed a link there so that you're able to look at this chart very closely and study it out at your pleasure whenever you have a chance. It would be great. However, we are going to cover these things in this presentation as well. So 332 was when Alexander the Great overcame the Persians, 332 years before Christ. And the reference that we have on the chart is C. Josephus, Antiquities, page 1, chapter 11. Okay, now we also see these two other dates, 164 BC and 158 BC. We're about to study this right now.
This is for the second angel?
No, we're still in the first. We're still in the first angel. Okay. It's a good question though. Thank you. We're still on the first angel. Now let's look at these other time periods. Right here. Okay, so 164 is the death of Antiochus Epiphanes, who of course stood not up against the prince of princes. There was a group of people during 164. 164 BC is the death of Antiochus Epiphanes. And why this is important is because there was a group of people that opposed what Miller was preaching, which was that it was the Romans that had stood up against Christ. And they said, no, it wasn't the Romans. They said it was Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay? And on the chart, it shows when Antiochus Epiphanes died. This cannot be the one that stood up against Christ because he died before Christ came. Okay?
And where was he from?
I think he was Greek.
Athenas, not from Athens.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
He was from Greece?
I believe he's Grecian.
No, just wondering.
Yeah. Perhaps I could look that up, find it. who of course stood not up against the Prince of Princes, which is Christ, as he had been 164 years dead before the Prince of Princes was born. See? So there was no way that he can be the one that stood up against Christ. Now, 158. This time was the time of the League of the Romans. Remember, we looked into this? The time of the league between the Jews and the Romans, 158 years before Christ. The reference that is given is First Maccabees chapter 9, verses 70 through 71. Now, Maccabees, where do we read this? In the Old Bible, that's correct. Yes, and in the Bibles of today, this particular chapter and others are considered the hidden book. The hidden book is the Apocrypha. Now, it's in order for you not to get confused, okay, with the Catholic New Testament Apocrypha, we're not referring to that one. We're referring to the Old King James Apocrypha. Okay, you would have to make sure that if you were to purchase this this book with
This book is
it used to be in the Old King James Bibles back in the 1840s.
A lot of those get burnt.
There was prophecy or some writings from Ellen White where she mentions the Apocrypha, and she says it has been burnt over and over. She said it. Now, I don't know if that is exactly what happened. I have tried looking for information on it. We know that it was removed from the King James version, but it's still available. The Apocrypha is still available today. There are Bible apps that will have the Apocrypha in it. In there, I have one. On my phone, I have it, and I also have it in book form. And so, as to how it was removed and all the story behind it,
See, can I ask you something?
you can.
You know that the reason why I say is that when they were being persecuted, that and they didn't want the people to know about the Bible because isn't that at the time when the French gave that Statue of Liberty to the United States, and at that time they weren't worshiping any God. And then they used that as a symbol, and I was just wondering if that was the case at that era.
Well, okay, you bring up a good point. You bring up now notice that was in France. That would be called the French Revolution, that took place in 1798. Okay, we will get into all of that and why that history is important. But no, you're not interrupting. That's fine. It's a question. It's a valid question. We're talking about the similar things because we're talking about the book that was removed from the Bible. This is called the Apocrypha. Okay, it used to be with the Bible that we read today, but for some reason, somehow, some way, it was separated from the original King James. You can still purchase it. You can still read it. It is available, like I said. But our pioneers used to have it all in one book, and that was called the Bible. Okay, the King James Version. Now, our pioneers are showing us within this chart, which was a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, Habakkuk chapter 2. The chart that we're looking at right here would also use the Apocrypha. Therefore, I believe
Uh-huh.
that is just as inspired. Okay, just like the Bible. Now I'm talking
That
about
was my question. It was inspired for that too?
yes,
That book?
yes, because we have it on this chart. Um, and if you were to read it, uh, we use the same rule that we use for anything else, and that's Isaiah 8:20.
And that chart is the same as plain of the on table, coming to the on table.
Yeah, the chart that we're talking about is the 1843 chart, which was fulfilled. Remember, May in the month of May, 1842. That the idea was given to Charles Fitch to construct a chart, and it would be used like a PowerPoint, like we have right here on the TV,
Mm-hmm.
to show the figures, the timeline of all the prophecies that William Miller was teaching, and it would be an illustration so that people can see it. See, they had no idea that they were actually fulfilling what Habakkuk was telling them to write the vision and make it plain upon tables. Okay, and so this chart, this 1843 chart, was a fulfillment of that, and they're using the Apocrypha. Okay, they're using the Apocrypha, and so I believe, according to what the Bible says, because it also said that that vision would not lie. The vision did not lie. So everything that's on the chart was made to be, and that there would be no lie on it. There would be no error. There might be a mistake, but if we're able to make it to that part of the study today, you're going to see why it was necessary. It was necessary. There's a whole there's a big difference between something that's a mistake and something that's a lie, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A mistake, it was meant to be. It had to happen. But a lie is not. A lie is not truth.
Okay.
It's opposite, right?
Uh-huh.
But a mistake, it can be truth, but it can be uh, meant to be, right? God can allow those things to happen, right? Just like there's a verse that says that God winks at our ignorance, right?
Yeah.
God winks at it, like doesn't pay much attention to something that we didn't know,
Uh-huh.
right? That can be fixed.
Yeah.
But something that we do willingly, knowingly, that's different. That would be iniquity, right? There's two different types of sin. One can lead you to death. The other one you have hope. You still have a chance, right? If you turn from it.
Uh-huh.
You can turn from both, but one is worse than the other.
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Lie is lie.
A lie is a lie. A mistake is not a lie.
No.
Okay? We have to be able to have that clarity when we're studying these things. Okay? We have to be able to distinguish. Now, the Apocrypha is inspired. So far, from what I've read, I don't see anything contrary to what God was showing in the 66 books that we have in the King James Version, or whatever version that you might have. 66, and then you had the Apocrypha back in the 1800s. Today, they split them up for some reason. They're both inspired. Okay? We can also see in Josephus as well, Antiquities, chapter 1, paragraph 13. We can find this information. And then Daniel 11:23. And after the league with him, he shall work deceitfully. That is speaking of Rome and the league with the Jews. They had made an agreement together. Now, seeing that this happened with the Jews, is it possible that this can happen today as well?
Yeah, we could.
Can it be that God's people, the chosen people that God brought out of Babylon and from these Gentile nations at the end of the prophetic periods, could they have also made the big mistake and joining with Rome?
Maybe.
I say yes.
Yeah, because history repeats itself.
Because history repeats it when we're ignorant.
Okay.
There's people that are ignorant to this history,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
If they reject this message, they're rejecting the history.
Uh-huh.
And what happens when we reject the history?
Get lost.
Yeah.
We're not only lost, but we end up repeating that history that we're rejecting.
We did this.
We reject Jesus. That's correct. Because this message is given by Jesus. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Right? Okay. Now, let's go forward. That's important. We're gonna study that. So try to keep it in mind. Okay, so notice here what William Miller wrote about Antiochus Epiphanes in Daniel 7, or Daniel 7th chapter. How perfectly plain do we trace the prophetic history of our world. From the days of Daniel to the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of heaven, he understood, right, that the coming of the Son of Man was the coming to this earth. All right?
Yeah.
That was providential.
Mm-hmm.
A mistake. Okay? He thought he was coming to this earth, but we're going to find out more about it later. The judgment of the saints and the everlasting kingdom of the glorified children of God. And yet, this good man, this teacher in Israel, sees not a single ray of light this side of Antiochus, a Syrian king who died 164. Okay, so here's the answer to your question. Antiochus was a Syrian king.
Silent. Oh.
Syrian. Who died 164 years before Christ was born. If Christ should come now, would he find faith on the earth? Oh God, have mercy and open the eyes of our teachers. Again, he tells us on page 86 and 87 that the events predicted in the 11th chapter of Daniel from 21 through 45 and the whole of the 12th chapter are to be referred, although to Antiochus Epiphanes. This to me is still more unaccountable how men of such erudition as Moses Stewart can for a moment suppose that all the description given here can or ought to be applied to one man. Yes, and that too, describing the events that were to happen to the people of God in the latter days, beginning with the fifth king of Persia and ending with a resurrection. Okay?
Yeah.
This is proof that it's not Antiochus Epiphanes, for he had died way before Christ even was born. Now, here's the league with Rome, and what Miller wrote about it. He said they could not have begun before they became connected with the Jews. Okay, so in order for them to arrive in prophecy, there had to be a connection with the people. That's what William Miller is saying here, with the people of God, with the Jews. For the reason that no nation is prophesied of or noticed in the prophecies except they are somehow connected with the people of God, and for the very reason that this beast was to tread down the Jews, and finally by cunning deceit and intrigue destroy the city and nation of the Jews, then I think the fairest conclusion is that when they became connected with the Jews by league, and they and when they had conquered Daniel's third kingdom, the Grecian, then and not until then had the Romans any part in this prophecy. This agrees with the angel's statement, Daniel 11:23. After the league made with him, that is Romans, he shall work deceitfully and become strong with the small republican people, that's the Jews. This league was made between the Romans and the Jews, ratified and carried into effect with the Greeks under Bacchides left besieging Jerusalem upon the command of the Romans, and as Josephus and Maccabees tells us, never returned to trouble them, the Jews, anymore. This league then took effect when the third kingdom in Daniel's vision ceased harassing the Jews, and the fourth kingdom began its rule over the Jews and the world. This was in the year BC 158. Let those who wish to be satisfied of the correctness of the foregoing statement read the 8th and 9th chapter of the first Maccabees and Josephus B. 12, chapter 10, section 6 of his Antiquities. Then, if this be correct, that pagan Rome began his power the year BC 158 and was to continue, notice how long, 666 years. Then would paganism fall. When did paganism fall?
When?
Yes.
66 years?
666.
Okay, but what does that take us to?
What?
Yeah, what time, what date?
That 666 plus.
508. Okay, the taking away of paganism. Remember we talked about this last Sabbath?
Yes.
No? A little bit?
The daily.
The daily, yes, the daily. That is correct. Okay? He took away paganism and then established the papacy.
Oh,
Papacy, okay?
okay.
Okay. Then in the year AD 508, paganism ceased. Finished. 508. Okay? Here you have the 10 kingdoms being referred to. You have the Visigoths, Huns, Franks, Saxons, Swedes, Burgundians, Lombards, and then there's the three that were plucked up by the roots. Okay, now these are all barbarian, these are all pagan. Okay, they're all pagan, but in 508, when the little horn was coming up, they had to obey the little horn, right? But there was three pagan barbarian nations. The Osgoths, the Vandals, and the Heruli were stopping him. They were saying no. And they were plucked up. Genocide. They were destroyed. All three. These three, they don't exist. No more. No more. Okay?
How did they live?
Genocide.
So they became the different.
No, destroyed. Killed. Assassinated. Yeah.
That's what genocide means?
That's what genocide means.
And I always wondered,
Genocide. All three. Okay? That's what it means that they were plucked up by the roots. Okay? Plucked up by the roots. And the result would be that would be the next slide. Let's look at divided Rome. We have 4 points here. It says, we can satisfy any mind that it was among the 10 kings, therefore, we cannot begin it before about AD 538. Then the 10 kings became, of course, of one mind, for when they were all converted to the Christian faith. Okay? Then how natural that they should agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, which is the papacy, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Okay, so the 10 kings, in order for them to be one mind, they would have to become Christian, right? And anybody that didn't were assassinated, like the 3 horns that we just saw. Now, point number 2, the 3 kings were then plucked up, the Heruli, Vandals, and Ostrogoths, and the last of which was of the Roman kingdom in 538 AD. Okay? 538 AD, they're plucked up completely, and then the papacy arises. Notice who was it that made this happen. Number 3, Justinian, emperor of Constantinople, called the dragon as well. This is Revelation chapter 12, gave the Pope of Rome his power, meaning a code of laws, on which his power was established and which were continued until the French abolished them. Who abolished them?
The French.
The French. Now, we're not going to get into that just yet, but it's notice that it's part of history right here. There was a time when the French came and abolished those laws that belonged to the papacy. Then, when Italy was made a republic in 1798, that's when it happened. All right? And his seat, the city of Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, and great authority, he made the bishop or pope head over all others, both in the Greek as well in all the Latin churches. Okay? This is how he got his seat. He had his great authority, right? And his power. It was given to him by Justinian, emperor of Constantinople. Notice the 4th point here. The remainder of the kings acknowledged the supremacy of the Pope and became subject to his ecclesiastical domination about the same time. Thus was the rise and the establishment of the power which Daniel calls the little horn, and the abomination that maketh desolate. Paul calls the man of sin. Remember?
Yeah.
That wicked. John calls the same power beast and woman, mystery Babylon, mother of harlots. Okay?
Mother of
Brother,
Eso está Apocalipsis
so
17.
all that this is coinciding.
Yes. And the result was the little horn.
that piece is a little.
That's the little horn. That's the beast with the little horn.
Rome.
Papal Rome. Okay. Notice the little horn
Uh-huh.
with a man's face on it, and then he has the triple crown. That's the papacy. Mhm. This is the one that plucked up the 3 horns by the roots. Okay. Okay. This is history. That's all it is. Now, the 7th chapter of verse. I'm reading from the chart. The 7th chapter, 8th verse. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. That's genocide. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. Now, jumping to the 25th verse is the interpretation. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. and they shall be given into his hand time. How much is a time?
One time and a half would be,
How much is one time? Let's go. Let's start with that. One year.
Oh, 1 year.
Time.
So that'd be 3.5 years.
And then times, which is 2 years.
Add that up.
Okay, that's 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And then a half.
Mm.
Just and a half.
3 years and a half.
Time and a half.
Time times
Yeah.
and a half. Time.
Time is 1 year and time is
Times is 2 years, and then
Uh-huh.
you add that up, and then
okay.
you get a half, so 3.5 years.
Okay, like that.
Okay. Verse 21. I beheld the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. 13 and 14 verses of chapter 7. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that uh, that which shall not be destroyed. Speaking of God's kingdom, right? Okay. So there would be 1,260 years of papal persecution.
And that's the second. That's the second term. The first
Was the pagan. Okay. Now, the time of the end. Okay. When is the time of the end?
But you said 1798.
That is correct. Thank you so much, Thomas. And Daniel 12:9 it says, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Okay? So what does it mean when it says that it's sealed? That it's closed up and sealed.
That means the new era starting, and that those people at that time have already been. The judgment is posed to them, right?
Okay, let's
Sealed.
let's take a look here at Isaiah 29, and it's gonna give us the answer. Okay,
Okay.
Isaiah 29 verses 10 through 12. The Bible says, for the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep. Okay. As we continue reading, it's going to explain what that means. Okay. This is not to be confused with death, right? Not the literal death, right? Because it says the same thing. But this is a spiritual death. Okay. A spiritual blindness. Notice.
Okay.
The spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. Okay. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, hath he covered. Okay. What does a prophet do?
It tells you what's going to happen.
It tells you what's going to happen. But according to what Isaiah is saying here, that he's blocking them from seeing. He's not allowing them to see it. See?
Okay.
Notice verse 11. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. Here's the explanation, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he said, I cannot, for it is sealed. Now we're talking about somebody that is learned, somebody that went to school, somebody that took time to understand, right? And you deliver that book to that person that is learning, he says, I can't because it's sealed. Normally, this is what happens when people read the book of Revelation, right? They read like, I can't read this because they can't understand. That's what they're saying, right?
Okay.
They can't
A
understand.
lot of people don't either.
No.
Okay, now we know what it means, right?
Mhm.
But notice what it continues to say. Let's just finish the verse. It says, and the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he said, I am not learned. Right? So the person that isn't learned, they all had reasons. Right? If a person doesn't study, well, can't understand. And so, but verse 10 lets us know that God put his hand over their eyes so that they can't see on purpose. See? On purpose so that they wouldn't understand. Right?
Okay.
That's what that means. Now, at the time of the end, the book of this little portion of Daniel would be unsealed. It would be open. Right?
Okay.
All right. So William Miller began to study. When?
Okay.
In the 1800s. After 1798.
Okay.
All right. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, okay? We're not going to say too much about that just yet, but just keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Daniel 12:8. And I heard, but I understood not. This is what Daniel is saying. He heard something, but he understood not. Why? Because it was sealed. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? What was it that he didn't understand?
Why?
Okay. Okay. See. Okay. Goodbye. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I thought you see me go like this, and you're going. You know?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ah.
You know I got recording.
Okay. So Daniel says, I heard, but I understood not. Right? And that was God that was not allowing Daniel to understand. So what was it that he heard? Daniel 12:5-7 says this. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on the other side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river. So there's two men on each side of the river, right? East side of the river. And there's one clothed in linen on the river. He's in.
In the river.
Yes. Okay. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? Okay. He's asking how long. So what are we talking about? Time. He wants to know how long this is gonna take. Then he says in verse 7, and I heard, this is what Daniel heard. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand um, and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. This is what Daniel did not understand. And this is what God unsealed in 1798. Okay? God unsealed this. He opened it. It had a seal on there, and he opened it in 1798 so that we can understand. In the 1800s, William Miller comes along, a deist, the person that didn't believe the Bible. He went to war. A bomb exploded just a couple feet away from him. He starts to wonder what's going on. Why? He didn't die. But his partners, one of them was injured, the other one died. Nothing happened to him. He begins to study the prophecies. The first thing he understood was the 7 times, which is what Daniel is talking about. The time, times, and half a time. It was right here, Daniel was seeing it only half. But to William Miller, it was given the whole thing. It's the same prophecy. It says, when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. This is what God unsealed. He opened it. When? In 1798. And we saw this was fulfilled through William Miller. Stay tuned for the next part of our study. We thank you so much for joining us. Keep these things in mind as we continue to study the first angel's message of Revelation chapter 14, 6 and 7. We're getting into really exciting part of our study. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for today. God bless.
And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven, and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters.